Cobra Kai is the surprising hit follow-up to 1984's The Karate Kid, the enduring tale of the young Daniel LaRusso learning karate from the effortlessly wise Mr. Miyagi in order to find self-confidence and stand up to his high school bully. The twist in Cobra Kai is in picking up the story 34 years later and primarily focusing on the apparent villain of the original, Johnny Lawrence. As he learns what it means to become a teacher when he takes a new teenager named Miguel under his wing and restarts the Cobra Kai dojo. Starting life on YouTube Red before recently moving to Netflix to air its third season, Cobra Kai is smart, funny and nostalgic in all the right ways, but there's also an underlying depth to the whole thing that makes it sit with you after you've watched it, in the way the original film did for a generation of teenagers. The new show takes what connected with people back in 1984 and manages to build upon it, expanding its perspective beyond Daniel while still respecting the original's heart and themes. The Karate Kid itself is an explicitly binary story on its surface, with apparently clear good guys in Daniel and Mr. Miyagi, and villains in Johnny and the Cobra Kais. But as star William Zabka told Vulture, in the 70s and 80s there was a good guy and a bad guy. It was very black and white. I think there's more shades of grey in entertainment in general, but especially in television today. So Cobra Kai the television show dives into the space between those dynamics, framing neither side as hero or villain and instead finding the shades of grey in between, the balance that sits at the heart of Cobra Kai and the Karate Kid. If you haven't yet seen Cobra Kai or the Karate Kid, expect some spoilers to follow. Cobra Kai was created by John Hurwitz, Hayden Schlossberg, and Josh Heald, three childhood friends who grew up in New Jersey. Heald created the story for and wrote on 2010's Hot Tub Time Machine, while Hurwitz and Schlossberg are more known as the writers behind the Harold and Kumar franchise. The three of them had shared a love for the Karate Kid in their youth, each connecting to the movie on a personal level. As Hurwitz said, "I fell in love with the underdog story, and learning about the concept of bullying and overcoming adversity. It was the perfect mix for a young boy. I saw it over and over." They were later inspired whilst rewatching The Karate Kid on DVD, envisioning a continuation of that story focusing on Johnny Lawrence. A revival of shows like Fuller House, the 2016 Netflix revival of Full House, that originally ran from 1987 to 1995, caused the three storytellers to realise that the media landscape was shifting, and bringing an old favourite from their childhoods back to life was no longer impossible. So, in 2016, the three began to seriously pitch the idea that would become Cobra Kai. They first had to secure the rights from the original movie producer and the studio behind the movie, Jerry Weintraub and Sony respectively, as well as Overbrook Entertainment, Will Smith's production company that made the 2010 reboot starring Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan. Fortunately, the creative head of Overbrook, Khalid Pinkett, was immediately on board with the new pitch and took it upon himself to get the other parties involved. As recalled by Hurwitz, he was like, "We're doing the show." He was the one fighting the fights in our meetings. Key to the revival, of course, would be getting original stars William Zabka and Ralph Macchio involved, Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso themselves. The hopeful creators invited Zabka to his favourite Mexican restaurant in LA, and quickly had him on side, though Macchio was expected to be a tougher sell. As explained by Heald, none of us knew him, but we had heard he was very hesitant to engage with anything Karate Kid related over the years. Forever the Johnny Lawrence to Macchio's Daniel LaRusso, Zabka at least advised the three writers to just make sure at his lunch they serve broccolini. That's the secret to his youth. After flying to New York to pitch to the Karate Kid himself, Macchio, though, was sufficiently impressed, and must have been approached over 1,000 times. It's always a variation of the Karate Man concept. It never felt exciting to me. I felt the legacy stood on its own. But regarding the pitch for Cobra Kai, however, Macchio said, they pitched not only the pilot, but the entire first season and what could be going on in the second and third. They were passionate, focused, and they had something they believed fans would want to see if they were able to dream up a show. What makes Cobra Kai so interesting as a series is the way in which it continues the world of the original films, but whilst also brushing up against something closer to our reality. That 1984 karate tournament meant everything to Daniel and Johnny, and set the tone for the rest of their lives, but the series makes it abundantly clear, even as it plays along with the concept, that they can't reliably sustain themselves like this. As Macchio described, it has this heightened reality, and the comedy is based on the fact that these two guys in their 50s will not let it go. Even the style of the series is just so 80s, stuffed with era-appropriate bangers and references.
Let's go, Sport! Good job, buddy!
We ain't gonna take it!
Attaboy! Come on, princess, let's go! Move down.
I don't believe it, not for a minute.
It's such a teen movie of the time, just like The Karate Kid, living in that cliche-laden, stereotype-populated, heightened reality of high school, where most major twists occur as a result of someone walking into the exact wrong conversation at exactly the wrong time. It's a reality where there's nothing more exciting than a new hobby, where a crush means the world, and where there's nothing worse in that world than a bully. But the show overall delights in throwing the past against the present, especially in the dynamic between Johnny and Miguel. Johnny is very much a man stuck in his own youth, a technological dinosaur with an outdated vocabulary, to put it lightly.
Drowning is for pussies, all right? Don't be a pussy. Use your legs.
He's the casually sexist and racist macho archetype of the 80s.
Hey, I'm Miguel. My family and I just moved into 109.
Great, more immigrants. Oh, no, that's just an illegal I picked up this morning. He's helping me set up.
I appreciate you coming in, but there are no girls in Cobra Kai.
Why not?
Same reason there aren't women in the army. Doesn't make sense.
Living in a world that has long moved on. As encapsulated by Zabka, people get to live vicariously through Johnny's ignorance of the times. That's what's endearing about him. He's never heard the term cancel culture in his life. He's not informed of what you can say, what you can't say. He's an artifact of the 80s. It's a fun way of countering the deep nostalgia of the series with a distinct self-awareness of why leaning too hard into that nostalgia, into the good old days, can be problematic. As much as it's entertaining to watch an increasingly wearily bemused Miguel coach Johnny in how to survive in a social media age, it's also keenly representative of Johnny's core issue, his inability thus far to grow and move forwards. Even the heavy use of flashbacks to the original movies, especially prevalent in the first season of Cobra Kai, serve to indicate just how stuck in the past Johnny and Daniel still are. Importantly, Cobra Kai carries over the core themes of the original film, but also presents it in a more modern context. The Karate Kid is all about Daniel learning to stand up to himself and to his bullies, and Cobra Kai aims to capture that same feeling of being powerless or helpless, but through a more modern lens, and doing that by contrasting the characters of the previous films with a new generation. Macchio said that what interested me the most was the younger characters. They were so fleshed out. They took the high school world and addressed bullying in the present day. That is what hooked me. Bullying is part of a social hierarchy that all teenagers basically have to deal with on some level, with 1/3 of young teens around the world apparently experiencing bullying, according to data released by the UNESCO Institute for Statistics in 2018. The climax of The Karate Kid is the perfect fantasy resolution. The underdog learns how to stand up for himself, gets some badass new skills, and puts the school bully in his place with a solid kick to the face. But Cobra Kai is interested in exploring how much more complicated the reality is, how fluid that hierarchy can be, and how problems can't be resolved with one good kick. As Hurwitz told Slash Film, all of us when we're younger experience bullying in one form or another, and then as you get older, you start to realise that the people who were bullying us may have had their own problems, and everyone has a bully in their own lives.
Back in the day, I just figured you were living the life, fancy cars, motorbikes.
It had its moments. Then I come home and pretty much get bullied every day.
And as this cycle continues in Cobra Kai, we see the social power dynamics between the kids constantly shifting, how the perception of who the bully or underdog is changes depending on who you ask. Cobra Kai recaptures all those feelings from the 1984 movie, but drags them out into the light to see how they look in the modern day. Being able to stand up for yourself is important, but by engaging in this perpetually violent battle between bully and underdog, relationships ultimately fracture, friendships are broken, and kids get hurt. And it's all because of some ridiculous feud between two grown men still pretending they're teenagers and unwittingly dragging these new teens into their shit. And so, of course, all of this comes down to the relationship between Daniel and Johnny. Coming into Cobra Kai, the two are in very different places compared to the first time we met them, arguably switching lives almost entirely. Johnny is no longer the popular rich kid, he's a deadbeat alcoholic and absentee father living in a rundown apartment complex, more reminiscent of the kind of place Daniel was living in The Karate Kid. By contrast, Daniel now has a successful car dealership business, a textbook suburban family, and a gorgeous California home. And yet, Daniel still sees Johnny as the villain, as his ultimate bully who made his life miserable in high school, and the embodiment of everything Daniel thinks he hates about his rival dojo. But as we see in Cobra Kai, Johnny doesn't really hold any actual power over Daniel anymore. He's barely keeping his own ship afloat. Restarting the Cobra Kai dojo isn't about screwing with Daniel, it's about his relationship with Miguel that Daniel doesn't understand because he has no perspective on it other than his own preconceptions. This not only allows us to see things more from Johnny's point of view now, but also extends that look backwards. It's obviously a long-running joke surrounding the Karate Kid, perpetuated by an episode of How I Met Your Mother that guest starred Macchio and Zabka, that Daniel was the real bully.
When I went to school here, I was bullied, and karate saved me.
Bullshit! I heard you were the real bully.
And Johnny was the true hero of the story.
Told him to get lost, mind your own business. Out of nowhere, the guy sucker punches.
What an asshole.
I know, man.
And it's not important whether that's actually true or not, but rather how the characters feel about it and their continuing inability to recognize that their own perspective isn't the only one that matters. And all of this is drawn from one specific scene in the original film, with the conflict shown in Johnny at the All Valley final.
Sweep the leg. You have a problem with that?
No, Sensei.
According to Hurwitz, we all have this fascination with Johnny Lawrence and the Cobra Kais. One thing that was always so interesting to us is that Johnny was conflicted in the tournament, and at the end he gives Daniel the trophy. In one brief but resonant moment, we saw Johnny feeling as powerless and helpless as Daniel had been, that there was possibly more to him than just what Daniel was able to see. Cobra Kai is all about diving into that particular dynamic, to bring Daniel and Johnny continuously closer to discovering the importance of expanding their perspectives.
You say one thing and then you say the opposite. You both think there's only one side to the story.
I know, there's two.
No, there's three. There's your side, and then there is the truth.
How they are as similar as they are different. Switching their situations also emphasizes how silly their hatred for each other is, based on truly irrelevant things that most adults move on from, and stuck blaming each other as the cause of all their problems, even though most of these problems can be traced back to the Karate Kid's overarching villain, John Kreese. Johnny wasn't even present during Cobra Kai's most overtly villainous phase in the Karate Kid Part 3, but Daniel is still unable to untangle Johnny from the Cobra Kai he remembers. This is where Daniel's wife Amanda works as his foil, his counterbalance, to plainly tell him to his face when he's acting like a teenager in an 80s movie, and to grow the hell up.
Yeah, you two seem to have this pretty well in hand. It's a normal Saturday afternoon, a couple of grown men about to kick each other into a pool.
This also drives home the idea that Johnny has always lacked that counterbalance, that really the only thing separating the two men is circumstance. Daniel had Mr. Miyagi to take him under his wing and help him where he needed it, but Johnny only had Kreese, who only ever wanted to use him. Zabka told Vulture, the Karate Kid was really about mentorship, with Daniel and Miyagi and Johnny's mentor, who happened to teach him the wrong things.
No such thing, bad student, only bad teacher. Teacher say, student do.
The Karate Kid was always a zero-to-hero story about growth and development, and Cobra Kai expands that to include more characters than just Daniel, like Johnny and Miguel and so many others. Daniel's journey isn't reserved for the original hero, and so every character gets to go on a journey of awakening of some kind, some with Daniel's help and some with Johnny's. Miguel and Johnny are the ultimate culmination of the show's ideas, and they represent more than any other pairing the old and the new, the 1980s versus the 2010s, the Karate Kid versus the real world. The show's core comes down to how they influence the other, sometimes for the worse, often for the better. It also shows that growth and development isn't a one-size-fits-all, you either get it or you don't kind of deal. Different people need different things to grow. Miguel is probably the most Daniel-like of the new cast, starting off in a very similar situation to Daniel in the original movie, and for a normal sequel, it would have naturally made sense thematically to pair up Miguel and Daniel, to follow up on Daniel becoming a mentor just like Mr. Miyagi was to him. But by pairing Miguel with Johnny instead, Cobra Kai gets to explore something more. Johnny gives Miguel something unique, and that development works both ways. Miguel is more socially aware than Johnny and a generally good kid, but he lacks the ability to stand up for himself and feels like a victim at school. So as much as the original films posit that the strike first, strike hard, no mercy mentality is overall bad and dangerous, the new series opens up the discussion that it's not necessarily all bad. If nothing else, Johnny is a survivor and he has a strength that Miguel doesn't. So teaching Miguel to defend himself isn't inherently a bad thing. Their joint development is in finding the right balance between the two of them, and so it has an effect on Johnny that it wouldn't on Daniel.
One of the best things has been teaching you. And I want you to know, no matter what happens, I promise, I'll always be on your side.
In Daniel's case, in Cobra Kai, he discovers that he isn't the natural mentor figure that Mr. Miyagi was. He can't simply step into his shoes and expect a perfect fit. His attempts to be the hero again just generally make things worse, often drawing others into their feud.
You're telling me that the whole Zarkarian dinner was just some convoluted plot so you could raise the rent on your childhood karate rival?
I think you're oversimplifying things.
Well, what about the other stores in the mall? I mean, did you even consider them?
And going as far as causing serious strain in his own home and work life. As much as he preaches his own balance and starts at Miyagi-Do explicitly only so that the kids can learn to defend themselves if necessary,
Balance is my thing.
his own hang-ups inadvertently weaponize his students against the Cobra Kais, only perpetuating the problem. Regarding Daniel's attempts to step into the Miyagi-shaped hole in his life, Schlossberg told Slash Film that we try to take the loss of Miyagi and turn that into something that an audience can resonate. As you get older, you lose that father figure or your mentor. Then it puts pressure on you to become that person to somebody else. And as we enter the story, Daniel hasn't yet learned that what works for him doesn't necessarily work for everyone else, and that he still has to find his own identity, rather than live exclusively in his own mentor's iconic shadow. And with Johnny, he's still a dick.
Don't give me this sexist bullshit, right? I'm just saying women aren't meant to fight. They have tiny, hollow bones.
But Miguel offers the balance he has always been missing. Johnny is still a relic of the past, in his references, his lifestyle, and his behaviour to his new students. He falls back on the teenager he used to be, the period he grew up in, and the way his mentor taught him, taking a much more blunt, direct, and certainly not politically correct approach to teaching.
When I look around this dojo, I don't see Cobra Kai material. I see losers, I see nerds. I see a fat kid with a funny hat with his tits popping out.
But Miguel and the other students are there to often ground Johnny, to push back whatever awful thing he's come out with and educate him where he needs it. In response, he also often ruins plenty of dramatic and emotional moments with some misplaced or inappropriate comment, which, as well as being a brilliant source of comedy that helps keep Johnny and the series as a whole from ever becoming either too blunt or too earnest, also further encapsulates the dichotomy between who Johnny Lawrence was and who he wants to be now. He has to overcome himself, his own prior conceptions and prejudices, sifting through the lessons of his youth to understand what he should pass on to Miguel. And this is key to the heart of the show, about what it takes to grow and move forwards from the past, to build on what came before. Cobra Kai thrives on that irony, that Daniel and Johnny are one solid conversation away from being actually good friends, digging deep into both the drama and the comedy that the whole dynamic creates. It leans perfectly into the 80s nostalgia that has been gripping us culturally in recent years, and serves as a sincere love letter to the original characters and films. And in a way, it even acts as a bit of a counterbalance to the nostalgia of properties like Stranger Things, where Stranger Things captures that feeling of looking back through rose-colored glasses to a more innocent time. Cobra Kai is what happens if you fail to let go of those times.
Sometimes it's good to visit the past, to know where you are now. But you can't live in the past.
And as well as carrying over the themes from the original films, Cobra Kai is about finding that equilibrium between opposing forces and ideas, learning to see people from different perspectives, and understanding that everyone has a side of the story to tell. The ultimate journey of the show isn't who will emerge victorious between the warring students of Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do, it's about finding the positive in both, and finding that balance somewhere in the middle. As Zabka told Screen Rant, it's not just good and evil and black and white, but there's shades of grey, and that we should look at the world through different people's point of view and try to come to some understanding and balance, on the backs of entertainment, some badass karate, some 80s music, and all that. It's a feel-good show for that is bringing families together. Thanks for watching. If you haven't watched Cobra Kai yet, you should probably head on over to Netflix and get on that. And who do you think is the real bully? And why is it definitely Daniel? Comment down below what you think, and what you think of Cobra Kai. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe if you want to keep up to date with what I'm talking about next. Thanks again, and see you later.